Well, good evening. It's lovely to see you here, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you also for a little bit more hand raising. I've got a question for you. How many people in this room have actually swum with a shark? This is good. This is good, but we can do much better. Definitely do much better, but I think you're going to have to come down to tropical climes where I'm living. I think it might be a little bit better than the cold water in Boston, potentially. Well, I would like to tell you a little bit more about whale sharks. Basically, I'd like to tell you a story of how the biggest fish came to be and what we have been learning about them over the last hundreds of years, and I'd say especially the last 10 years. And I do call it an enigmatic and peripatetic fish. You'll find probably at the end of the talk it's less mysterious, but definitely still very much a walkabout species, and definitely an ambassador for a whole host of other sharks. And I'll be telling you a bit more about that. Let me make sure that this is working. It was working for us. So I think we really want to start our story over 60 million years ago in the Cretaceous Period, which is when it's thought that actually whale sharks evolved, along with their cousins, basking sharks, megamouth, the two other planktivorous sharks, when there was really quite a sea of very large, toothy megapredators. And it was around this period also that we had that big extinction event. So unfortunately, we don't have a whole heck of a lot in the fossil record, because as you probably know, sharks have cartilaginous skeleton, and some of the few things that you do find over the ages from sharks are primarily their teeth. And since whale sharks don't really have much teeth, I call them the toothless sharks compared to the toothy sharks, like great whites and such. We don't really know very much what happened with whale sharks until relatively recently, because we just don't have much of a record. So we're going to zoom forward from 60 million all the way to kind of, what is it, I think it was 60 BC or thereabouts, the tale of Jonah, or in the Quran known as Yunus. And apparently this poor unfortunate fellow fell into the mouth of a whale. Now that's according to Christianity, but in Islam they say that it was actually a large fish. And since Islamic countries tend to be more subtropical and tropical, at least in the areas where you have some of the seas, my guess is it could have been a whale shark. That's what I'd like to think, because there's so much bias towards marine mammals these days. I really want to give the fish a bit more of an advantage. So we're fast forwarding again, because we still don't know very much about whale sharks. We don't have many accounts of them. You hear a lot of sailors saying, oh, we've been struck by a large behemoth from the deep, etc. But we don't have very clear descriptions of them. So we have to go all the way to about 1828, at which point a young man named Wright in South Africa discovered whale sharks properly. And named Smith, Smith in 1828 in South Africa. And sure enough, I just wanted to show that, laser pointer here, that indeed, you see, there's a modern day, or at least a relatively modern day Jonas right there. Modern, so discovered in 1828, and from then on you had a few sightings, a couple of historical accounts. Again, not very much. So here we've got this big, huge, largest fish in the sea, purported at this point to be even up to 20 meters in length, yet nobody seems to know much about them. Until we get to the early 1900s. And that's where things start heating up a little bit, with the arrival of W Gaja, who was in the Natural History Museum in New York. And this man literally dedicated his working life, it seems, to chasing any report he could find on whale sharks. W Gaja actually published 47 papers on whale sharks, and the poor unfortunate man never actually got to see a live one. Most of his papers consisted in sightings in Cuba and ship strikes, etc., which is how most people encountered whale sharks at the time. And I'm just showing a couple of these pictures, and I want to thank Toby Curtis, who's in there, for having sent this one to me. And just to show that whale sharks were found, or can occasionally be found, even in temperate waters of New York, and I've even heard up in New Brunswick, they've been caught in herring weirs. So, these are not just your subtropical and tropical animals. And we then fast forward from the mid-50s or thereabouts when Gaja died, sadly, and we have very few records, very little information, again, on this biggest fish until about 1986, when Faye Wolfson decides to take it upon herself to collect all the sightings that have been found. She combines them all, and a map that came out with the distribution of whale sharks is part of that result, also put together by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. And as you can see, you've got them coming all the way up to Maine, all the way up into Canada here. And one of the interesting things is it looks like there's a break. Like this could potentially be one population and this another, primarily because we don't see any mixing right here. We found no evidence yet of movement of whale sharks from one body of water to the next, but we'll talk about that in a little bit, because that's part of some of the mystery that's been unraveled, particularly through genetics. So there we are, 1986, and unfortunately then the baton does not get passed to anybody in particular. Miss Wolfson dies, and there we go, the large fish languishes again until the late 80s, at which point we have our true point of departure. And I'd say that Western Australia, Ningaloo Reef right here. Let me see if I can get this arrow to go. I know the laser pointer. Right here in Western Australia, Ningaloo Reef, absolutely stunning part of the world that I've sadly never been to. Actually was one of the first described predictable aggregations of whale sharks in the world. And this is where the first whale shark tourism really took off. And there was one man in particular who really started spending a lot of time in the water with the whale sharks. That's Jeff Taylor, a doctor who happened to spend a lot of time out of Exmouth and the Ningaloo Reef area. And he started putting together information on the seasonal patterns and when they were there, what they might be feeding on, etc. And so I'd say that he was one of the pioneers, and another one of the pioneers was a woman after my own heart. This is Eugenie Clark. Fantastic, fantastic woman who I believe is over 90 years old now, living in Florida, remote marine. You should look out for some of her old books, Lady with a Spear, Shark Lady, all these fabulous old titles. She looked good in a bikini while she was measuring sharks. Apparently, according to very old or older friends of mine, she was definitely the sexy babe of the science, of the research community back in the 50s and 60s. So, but what did she contribute in terms of science? Well, two very key things. The first one is a publication that she worked on with Young in Taiwan, and it's all of our knowledge on whale shark reproductive biology comes from a single individual, one female that was caught in Taiwan and that was found to have, as you can see lining up there, about 300 pups or embryos. And what that revealed to us was, first of all, this is the most prolific of all shark and ray species. So it can produce the most of all shark and ray species, and that it's ovoviviparous. So it has a form of reproduction whereby the shark is grown in an egg case inside the uterus, and then it is born live. So the egg case opens, and the shark is born live. But what was even more interesting was the fact that all 300 pups were not at the same stage of development. So it's almost like conveyor belt reproduction. So imagine that you probably had a long gestation period. I mean, I've got 2 children, and I can't imagine having more than 2 at the same time. And coming out in conveyor belt style. And sadly, one of the things that we don't know is how long that gestation period is, because most sharks, or a lot of sharks, have a gestation period of 9 months, 12 months, sometimes even 2 years. And after they've given birth, or pupped, as we call it, they then have a period, a reproductive pause, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years. And we have absolutely, still to this day, no idea past this single sample of what's going on with whale shark reproduction. So she contributed to that, which was fantastic and very, very helpful. Oops.
What was the bottom image?
Sorry, that's what I was going to just go on to. Sorry about that. The bottom image is a calanoid copepod, which is one of the favorite foods of whale sharks. So the other thing that she did, and very ingenious and resourceful woman, she went to La Paz in Baja California, where there was known to be whale sharks. But again, not much was known about what was going on with whale sharks there, whether they aggregated predictably or not. And she took pantyhose, and she dragged pantyhose in the water, and she found that they were feeding on calanoid copepods. And so that was a paper that came out, and I think that's great. You come across whale sharks, you're not sure what they're feeding on, you're resourceful, you want to do your science, that's how you get it done. And so she was one of the first people to actually talk about some of their feeding behavior and some of their preferred food. And in fact, what we have found is that whale sharks have several different feeding behaviors, from the kind of ram filter feeding on the surface here, where they keep about 10 to 20% of their mouth above the water open, and then about 80% below the water. And we know a lot of this from a very nice paper that came out from Phil Mota last year on some of the feeding that's occurring with whale sharks in Mexico. And these animals can be like a kind of surface hoover of sorts, and they'll ingest everything from the copepods to suggested shrimp to chaetognaths, all these tiny little zooplankton. And they'll also be eating things like jellyfish, squid, ctenophores, etc. Sorry if you can't see the ctenophore down here. But what I am going to show you is that they don't only have to move all the time to eat, like basking sharks. They actually can stay stationary and do the suction feeding mechanism, which allows them to actually feed on very dense and kind of limited area prey. So let me just show you. This is from Bahia de Los Angeles in Mexico. And I'm going to call out several names, etc., because one of the things that I would love for all of you to do, since I saw that there were quite a few hands that were not raised because swimming with the sharks, is for you all to decide where you're going to go and swim with the sharks after this. And you'll have many, many options, believe me. So they have this big suction mechanism. They have these basically modified gill rakers that enable them to trap all of these small animals on these plates, and they're able to actually nourish themselves that way. And some of these animals and some of the food that they're ingesting is less than 1 millimeter in diameter. So it's remarkable that an animal that is purported to reach at least 20 meters, the only one that was actually correctly measured was measured at 12 meters and 75 centimeters, but there are many accounts of much larger animals. So that these animals can actually sustain themselves on such small prey. So okay, that gives you an idea of how they're able to suction feed. And they'll switch between suction feeding and also the ram feeding, depending on what prey they're eating and how concentrated that prey might be. And one thing to note, though, is that a lot of people think, oh, whale sharks are not really top predators. They might be sharks, but they're not really right up there at the top like the great white. But actually they are. They're just the top predator on a very short food chain. very short trophic linkages, phytoplankton, zooplankton or fish eggs, and then finally the whale shark. But I have to say that there's a host of predators that go after whale sharks. If you are born at about 40 centimeters or so, and you have no teeth, and you're pretty much all head and just a little wobbly tail, you look like a lure. Everything wants to eat you. So your strategy really has to be grow very, very quickly. And that's one of the things that we have learned from animals in captivity and also animals out in the wild, that the small animals are actually growing incredibly quickly, sometimes up to a meter at a year. So the predators that whale sharks do encounter are actually everything from what you see, what you might infer here. This is in Mozambique, a whale shark that's washed up with enormous shark bites. And so great whites are known to attack them. Orcas, marlin are supposed to be eating them, blue sharks, etc. So I think that's another reason why, obviously, their reproductive strategy is such that they have so many young, so that some of them actually do finally survive. And it's worth noting that in all the distribution and sightings that people have had of whale sharks, there's practically none of the very, very small or recently born pups, the neonates, even young of the year. Usually whale sharks under 2.5 to 3 meters are barely ever found. The biggest predator is actually us at this point, from what we can tell. I mean, we don't have a clear idea of what mortality in the wild is, but we do know how many we've taken. And we do know that where fisheries have existed, for example, in India, Taiwan, Philippines, formerly the Maldives, I know Indonesia, there's been a good take, and now, unfortunately, the looming giant is China. These were pictures that were recently taken in China, and there's the meat. It was formerly known in Taiwan as tofu shark. It sold for up to $15 US a kilo, which is very high for shark meat. And of course, you're obviously getting bang for your buck if you get a whale shark here. But they were often fished, especially in India, for their liver, because their liver was used as a waterproof for boats, and sometimes for their skin, and occasionally for their meat, but a lot of people didn't like the taste of the meat. One thing to note, though, is that the skin is some of the thickest in the animal kingdom, up to 15 centimeters thick. And in fact, what you're seeing here, and what I discovered after taking some biopsies, is that this is pretty much all lipid. It's kind of a fat layer. So they do seem in some ways closer to whales than one would think. And that's one of the ways that we actually hypothesize they're able to stay warm as well, because they cannot regulate their temperature. One thing I did come across in an airport is, I was just looking at this picture the other day, these are fins. A set of fins, whale shark fins, is purported to sell for about $15,000 in China. So there is a huge demand, not for the fin soup, because the ceratotrachea, or these fin rays that you get, are apparently not ideal for shark fin soup. But it's a status symbol. And if you have a big shark's fin, then it just shows that maybe your restaurant is that much better. So I came across this picture, and what was kind of scary about it is that the way that the dorsal fin is slanted, it looks like that could potentially be a whale shark. Because there are very few dorsal fins that have that 45-degree slant. So the fisheries have hit whale sharks very hard, but I have a little bit of good news. First of all, we've got a lot of information on sharks, on shark musculature, etc., from those fisheries, and we have noted that where they did exist, they've actually declined significantly. The numbers have declined significantly. So it shows that this is, no matter what anybody says, this is never going to be a sustainable fishery. So one of the best ways forward is to try and just protect the animal. And despite all the fact that you've got fishermen who are able to find them, and we do have some predictable aggregations, overall, they're incredibly hard to find. I work a lot with fishermen, because that's my first port of call. If you want any kind of information, best thing you can do is go and talk to the people who have the PhD of the sea. And I was in Banda Aceh in Indonesia, and fishermen and tour guides had said, yes, we see quite a few whale sharks around. We were absolutely excited. I had my satellite tags ready, and we spent 2 weeks going up and down in front of Banda Aceh when the tsunami was, and it was not a whale shark to be seen. There were a couple of mantas, but they fled very quickly, and I found out later why when I investigated the Banda Aceh shark market, and there were dead mantas, so there's a strong manta fishery. So struck out on the whale sharks, but found out a lot about the shark fishery there. So this is where I'd like to take the story over to, obviously, a place that's very close to my heart, and that's Belize. Belize is a very small country in the Western Caribbean, right here, nestled between Guatemala, Honduras next door, the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, and we actually have the second largest barrier reef in the world after the Great Barrier Reef. It's about 250 kilometers in our territorial waters, and the whole Mesoamerican barrier reef stretches about 900 and some kilometers long. Now, I was working on a project looking at reef fish spawning aggregations. Now, reef fish spawning aggregations are large aggregations of fish that come together with the purpose of reproducing at a particular time and place. And they're very predictable, and unfortunately, a lot of these aggregations have been completely extirpated because they are so predictable. And one of the fisheries that I was looking at, there you go. One of the fisheries here, Gladden Spit, had, there you are. Okay, Gladden Spit has several species of fish that appear to be reproducing. And how we knew that was we were doing a lot of surveys with fishermen. And they all told us, we catch a lot of snappers in March, April, May. In fact, we just fill our boats and we go home. Well, we know from extirpation of spawning aggregations at other sites that this is not a sustainable fishery. And so we started to investigate it a little further, especially when they said, oh, yes, and by the way, there's some really big sharks there, and we don't know what they're doing. So we decided, well, this sounds like it's time for an adventure, figure out what's going on beneath the waves, because the fishermen don't get in the water there. They don't get in the water. And I've seen them fall in as a joke. Sometimes one pushes one in and they fall in, and I've never seen somebody climb aboard a boat so quickly. And it's because they know what's under the waves, big bull sharks, all the rest. So there we go. So that's Gladden Spit there. And so what we decided to do is don some tanks, fall over backwards. Sorry, it's a little bit difficult to see, but all those points, and there are thousands in that particular school, are actually fish. They're huge snapper, over a meter or close to a meter long, and these snappers are aggregating in vast quantities, 5,000 to 10,000 fish at a time. It's absolutely spectacular to behold. And we were with the venerable late Bob Johannes, who was the king of spawning aggregations. And I have to tell you, we knew we'd come across something exceptional, probably unique in the world, when I turned to look at him, and through his mask, his eyes were as big as dish plates. And they got even bigger, if you can think that's going to happen, when this guy came trundling through the school as well. And this is what greeted us in April 1998. And I have to tell you, I'm usually pretty good with my air consumption when I go diving, but in this particular case, I think you would probably hearing me going. Not only that, what you're not seeing here is you've got 9 to 10 foot bull sharks patrolling down below, and you've got Cretaceous truncatus, the bottlenose dolphin, swooping through, and occasionally an angry loggerhead. I call this place not just Gladden Spit, but the place of the angry turtles. Because I kid you not, I'm scared of loggerheads. I have no problem with bull sharks, but I'm terrified of loggerheads. And the reason is because they want to mate with you. Okay? And it happens to be, love must be in the air, or at least in the water, because not just the fish are having a good time, but the loggerheads, and they seem to be segregated, and all you get there are the big males, and they're aggressive. But anyway, that's another story for another talk. So we're right back for the turtle talk. We can talk about that. I do turtle work too. It's big, I can see it, I have glasses. If you ask me to do zooplankton, it would be a different story. So there we go. You can see right over here, there's just a little bit of release of eggs and milk. So things are starting to happen here. There's a lot of courtship. And there we go. This is what happens next. It's hard to see, because a lot of the spawning actually takes place close to dusk. And we were the first people to witness this event. And imagine thousands upon thousands of fish releasing eggs and milk everywhere. Imagine how good that is for your hair. It's fabulous. So here are the fish spawning. You can just see all of this is eggs and milk. And there's a little whale shark. He's not so big. He's far away, so he's probably about 4 to 5 meters. And actually, this is somebody that you may want to come and see in about 2 or 3 weeks. That's Brian Scarry. He's worked with me in several different occasions, and he took some really fabulous photos. His were going to be so much better than mine. But I'm doing research, so I haven't. But here's this huge opalescent cloud that just expands and expands. And one thing we learned very, very quickly is do not get caught by the cloud. It's like that Stephen King novel. What was it? The Fog? Yeah, because you just don't know what's going to come through. It could be a 25-foot whale shark, or it could be a 9-foot bull shark, or it could be my friend the angry turtle again. You just don't know what it is. So we learned the lesson, stay out of the cloud. And this is just to show you, this is almost a 30-foot whale shark that is disappearing in this massive cloud of spawn. So yes, you can imagine, we're all looking at each other, our eyes are huge, we get back on the boat. I have to say, we were usually chattering away before we'd go to any of these dives. After that, we were silent, and we realized that we had our life's work cut out for us. Yes?
Were those whale sharks there purposefully or randomly in that particular situation?
You are about to find out. I'm trying to kind of keep the mystery and suspense. Spoiler alert. No, please, if you do have any questions, please do ask. I love questions. Absolutely love them. So what would you do if, first of all, you know you don't often find them, you have all these questions, and how many of them are there? How many whale sharks are there? Are these whale sharks coming there specifically for the spawn? Well, we answered that question because that was a question that the fishermen had. They wanted to know, they thought that the whale sharks were reproducing there. So what are they doing there? Well, we found out they're there to feed. Okay, question one. But now we had about 100 other questions. And we needed a whole toolbox in order to study them. And these included everything from marker tags, which I use primarily because you have seen one whale shark, but then you go, wait a second, is that the same one? Is this one? Wait, oh, is that? No, that, wait, how many are there here? So you start using marker tags to differentiate between the different whale sharks. And then, of course, you're not always there to look at the whale sharks, and you don't always know if they're coming or going, etc. So you need these more remote methods. So using things like acoustic tags, which you place on the whale shark in the same way as a conventional tag, using a bull spear and a dart. And then every time that whale shark comes close to this receiver, a time and date stamp will tell you when that particular shark came to that particular area. So this is very, very useful for answering your question of, are these same sharks coming back? And are they coming purposefully to the spawning aggregation to feed? But what happens if you want to find out what they're doing when they're not around an area that has a receiver. Then you have to use something else, like a satellite location only tag, or a smart position only tag, as Wildlife Computers calls it. I like to draw little faces on them. It just makes them a lot friendlier. Maybe with a face, so they won't be as heavily predated on, because they kind of look like mirrors behind the whale sharks. But what these do is they drag behind the whale shark on a tether, and whenever the whale shark is up at the surface and the tag is on the surface, it will actually send up a location to the satellite, an email to me, and so the shark is basically telling me, Rachel, I'm here. Now I'm here. Now I'm over here. Now I'm on land. Oh, there's a problem. I've had that several times. In fact, I'll just give you a little anecdotal thing. In Madagascar, I was so excited. The whale shark was going all over the place, and then all of a sudden it started walking towards a local community. Then it took the bus. And I'm there ringing Antananarivo, WCS central office, saying, I think what tag is off, and I think I know where you need to go and get it. And they actually did retrieve the tag. Nice little side anecdote. Yeah. But the thing is that with these technologies, you still don't know what you know what they're doing in the horizontal and the site fidelity, so the presence versus absence. What are they doing up and down? What are their preferences, their environmental preferences in terms of temperature, etc.? And this is where this wonderful little Ferrari of tags comes in, which is, and I say Ferrari of tags because it looks small, but it only costs $3,500 US. Yeah, it's, yes. And these tags basically are able to archive many times a minute. Before, the most you could do was once every minute, the depth that the whale shark was going at, its temperature, etc. And then, at a time that you pre-programmed, it would actually pop off from the animal, float up to the surface. It could float up from quite deep, and then transmit those messages again to me, so that the shark is basically sending me an email. So you've got all these different methods, and you've got many, many more, but I'm just going to focus on those. There we go. Okay, now one method that you can all get involved in, if you decide, for all of those who want to go and swim with sharks, is to do photo identification. And we've got a great site called whaleshark.org. It was started by Brad Norman and Jason Holmberg. And they've got everything on the web. So you could just shove your photos up there and they'll send you updates saying, oh, your shark was seen again here and then there, etc. And the photo ID then enabled me to stop using conventional tags. My tag retention on conventional tags was awful. And I hated putting a tag on an animal that I didn't have to. And so here we have this unique spot pattern right behind the gill area. And with that, we're able to be identified between years and between areas of the different sharks. So that's been very useful. A couple of other things that I've been doing is a lot of plankton tows to look at what we have in the water, what the eggs, the different types of zooplankton, etc. And actually, sometimes you have to actually venture out right next to the shark. I'm there with a little jar next to his mouth, trying to get some water samples, because I'm pretty sure that some of the chemicals that you get off of the zooplankton, especially what's called DMSP, dimethyl sulfopropionate, might be one of the key cues that these whale sharks actually hone in on in order to find spawning aggregations, in order to find these zooplankton patches. So let me give you some of the neat results that we did find. Well, with those PAT tags, those Ferrari tags, as I like to call them, we did find out that actually they are capable of really diving. These animals were thought to only go to 300 meters maximum. These were basking style sharks. No, no, no. One tag that we got back that had all the data every minute for 206 days basically showed us that it's going down to less than 5 degrees centigrade at times, and that this is the depth trace over the course of many months. And what it does show us is that it's going repeatedly to 1,000 meters, back up again, 1,000, and so on and so forth. And this was a real eye-opener, and also a paper, which I was very happy to get out of that. because it blew everybody away. And one of the reasons that we actually had to cut the tag off the animal the following year, thank goodness it came back to Gladden Spit, was it had actually superseded the tag's, I guess, the testing limit. So it had gone to beyond 1,500 meters, and that is 4,500 feet. And in fact, now, some of my colleagues, Eric Hoffmeyer, who works in the northern Gulf of Mexico, has got whale sharks going to beyond 6,600 feet. Imagine that. So one of the reasons that they're able to do that is, remember, they've got a lot of volume, they've got that really thick, lipidy skin, so it makes them less compressible. But they are able to withstand those cold temperatures. And one of the things that we also found when you take a 24-hour chunk out of the day, out of that big long trace, is that you're seeing different types of behavior between night, which is hashed, and between day, whereby you're seeing bigger dives during the day and closer to the surface at night. And I think some of the reason for that, you're seeing that with a lot of other different animals, tunas, basking sharks, etc. What they're doing is they're chasing their prey, and a lot of their prey are avoiding visual predators during the day. The prey is zooplankton, so they'll be a bit deeper. Whereas at night, it rises up, it's called the deep scattering layer, and that's when the whale sharks will start feeding on that layer right here. So found out a little bit about their feeding behavior that way. So again, bit by bit, solving the mystery.
Do you find it peculiar that they keep cycling up and down rather than cruising at particular levels for extended periods?
Well, absolutely. And in fact, one of the things that when we're looking at some of these traces, and I'll talk about this in just a little bit, I think I might have actually taken it out here, so it's a good thing to talk about. There is one of the things that I was able to get out of those data points was to demonstrate that they do have rhythmicity. They basically dive with patterns every day, as in a daily pattern, a circadian pattern. They are doing something every 45 minutes. They're doing something every 8 hours, all this linked to their diving activity. And here, if you notice, you kind of see a bit of a pattern, and that could be linked to that 45-minute pattern. And what I think that they're doing here in particular, because they're very sharp profile dives, is that they're actually taking a rest. And then in looking at their ascent, they're swimming up twice as fast as they're going down. So imagine the energetics of that. They're taking a little rest maybe, and then they have to swim up very, very fast. And a colleague of mine, Adrian Gleis, has been looking at the energetics of whale sharks and what's the cost of only doing very shallow dives versus very deep dives, and looking at the trade-offs in that based on what kind of food you might be eating. So we're really starting to push the frontiers of our understanding of this particular species. We don't have absolute answers in terms of when they make their switches for shallow dives and deep dives, because we don't always know what they're feeding on, but we're getting there. And again, if you just overlay a lot of the diving day after day after day, this is the kind of trace that you would get. Just very simple, again, mainly demonstrating that they stay shallow, 200 meters and above at night, and do the majority of their deep diving during the day. So, to go back to your question of, are these sharks coming in specifically for the spawning, I had to set up an array with these acoustic receivers all up and down the Belize Barrier Reef, and some of the different atolls that you have offshore. And some of these areas are spawning sites. Spawning site here, spawning site there, here, there, number 7, and one at 10 as well, because I wanted to look at whether they were being attracted to other spawning sites in the country and not just Gladden Spit. Well, the answer to that, I don't have a bunch of maps up, but Gladden Spit was really the only spawning site that they spent any appreciable amount of time at. And what we did find out is that over the course of 3 years with 23 whale sharks, these gray lines indicate the full moon period. You see the months up here. Basically, they're just honing in on that full moon period when the snappers come in to spawn and leave directly afterwards. Come back for the next month, leave afterwards. Now originally, when you talked to the fishermen, they said, oh, they're here from March, and April and May, and we don't see them after that. But what we found out from this is that, yes, they're there in April, May, they're also there in June, July, August. So we learned some new patterns, and we learned a lot more about whether the spawning is still ongoing in other months of the year, just from the whale shark's visitation pattern. And when we double checked it, we ground truthed it by actually diving during those months as well. And what was very helpful with this particular piece of work is that you were getting a lot of the younger fishers saying, you know what, fishing's really hard. Flat and spit takes the full fetch of the Caribbean on it, and you've got some currents as well. It can be a very hard place to work. And you get some of the younger generation saying, you know what, we really don't want to fish. We'd like to become tour guides instead. We really like the idea of taking people to see whale sharks. We'll make more money too, and then maybe we can party with the guests afterwards. I know how it works. I used to be a diver. And one of the questions they had for me was, when should we be pitching this whale shark tourism? And I said, well, definitely not from October all the way to March. Don't even bother, because they're not coming in, and you're going to waste your money and raise expectations, and everybody will be angry with you. So it's a way of answering some of the fishers' questions, helping with the management, also helping local socioeconomics. And I'm just showing this one. This is kind of the same type of work in Madagascar with a small array of acoustic receivers, trying to figure out if the whale sharks were showing a similar type of visitation pattern, and whether it was linked to spawning or something else. And you know, there we found it wasn't linked to spawning. It was definitely pulses of productivity or zooplankton, and also a very strong correlation with sea surface temperature. And this is kind of all the time that they were spending at the different receivers in this particular small island. If you ever go to Madagascar and you'd like to see whale sharks, oh, and by the way, another little anecdote. Can I tell another little anecdote? Sure. Okay. So I've been invited by WCS to go and check out the possibility that there are whale sharks in Nosy Bay, northwestern Madagascar. And I'm all excited. Oh, Madagascar, I'm wanting to go there. I want to see a lemur. Okay, I'm just going to fast forward and say I've been there 4 times and I haven't seen a lemur.
I have.
I'm very envious. Have you seen a whale shark?
No, unfortunately.
But you're really going to get upset with me, because let me tell you about my first trip out in the boat. Get in the boat, working with fishermen, local guides again. Modus operandi, works very well. Love working with fishermen, love them so much I married one. And he was happy. I produced 2 sons for him. Long reproductive pause on my head. And so basically, how did I get on with that? So I'm in the boat, and we chug out, and all of a sudden the guy goes, "Oh, regarde!" And I'm looking, and I go, "Oh my God, but that's not a whale shark. It's a Megaptera novaanglia. It's a humpback whale." 2 humpback whales, 10 minutes from shore. Wow, welcome to Nosy Bay, Madagascar. Fantastic. I go, great, yeah, but they're marine mammals. Let's move on. Moving on, about 10 minutes later, oh, regarde! Great, what now? Oh my God, it's a whole squadron of mobula, the cousins of the mantas, another lovely filter feeder. Got in the water, spent half an hour with them. Fabulous. Thought, this can't get any better. We're still looking for the whale sharks. Get back in, 5 more minutes, 2 manta rays. This is great. This is like heaven for me. It's filter feeding heaven. 10 minutes more, sailfish. First time in my life I've ever been in the water with sailfish, chasing bait. At this point, I'm just like, I don't even care if they're whale sharks. But 20 minutes later, we arrive at the spot where supposedly they're supposed to be, and there they were on cue. Nobody even had to deploy the inflatable. They were there, and there were 3 of them that particular day. Now, I have to tell you, I've never had a day like that again in Madagascar. What a welcome. What a welcome. So those are the things that sometimes you just luck out. So just to show you, just to give you an idea with these little toe tags, what they look like, just to give you a little spice here of how they work. And I didn't even use any swear words here, so that's good. So you see the filter feeding on the surface. These are actually relatively calm conditions. This is an aggregation that, where did I take this? I think I took this in Mexico. So here's a little tag right there. So somehow, this little tag manages to stay afloat long enough and be dry long enough to send the signal to the satellite. When the satellite happens to be actually circumnavigating that particular part of the world, which tends not to be as much as in Boston, for example. You get much better satellite coverage than we do down there. So it's remarkable that we actually even get any data, which then brings me to the data. I'm absolutely thrilled because there are a couple of things that we did manage to do with these data. First of all, obviously there are no receivers there in the middle of the deep water. This is a Cayman trench. It can go down to 5 to 7 kilometers deep in these areas, and it comes right into Guatemala. And what we find, these are all tracks of different satellite tag whale sharks. What they're doing is they're using the bathymetric contour, it seems, to navigate around this Gulf of Honduras area. Highly productive area, mainly because you've got pulses of nutrients coming out from all these different rivers, very high rainfall. I live right here. I get 5 meters of rain a year. So if you think yesterday's rainfall was bad, sorry, don't complain. I was reveling in it. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm at home. Except you have fog. I don't have fog at home. And what was really neat was just seeing the connectivity between this spawning site and another feeding site over here. And then, lo and behold, fishermen in Honduras on Utila Island have said, oh, when we go out to this bank over here, we see whale sharks. Well, sure enough, some of the tagging has ground truthed what the fishers have said, and it looks like we might have another aggregation site over here. Very, very exciting. I doubt I'm going to be working there. It's a main transshipment area for Colombian cocaine. So, that's a way to fund my research. Anyway, which reminds me, actually, in all the work that we do get a lot of low-flying planes without any lights. And which is why Belize just got blacklisted by Obama recently as being one of the drug countries. Yes. Anyway, slight diversion again. So here we go. We've got this kind of, we're figuring out what's going on here. We're actually doing a lot of work analyzing their foraging patterns in here because we've got great data. I won't go into the details now, except to say that, ooh, we have some traces going up to Mexico. How exciting. So we're starting to see what looks like potentially a corridor. And while before I go up to Mexico, I just want to show you that you can actually see a lot of these tracks if you guys all want to go in. High school folks who have seen lemurs but not whale sharks. You can live vicariously through wildlifetracking.org, put together by Michael Coyne. Lovely man, incredibly bright, brighter than I could ever hope to be in 3 lifetimes. And he is able to actually help map productivity, so the amount of chlorophyll that you see in the water, which is usually an indication of how much zooplankton or food might be around for whale sharks, with the tracks of the whale sharks. So I do urge you, go and see some of the tracks. I've got mantis up there, whale sharks, etc. And here we go. Let's go into the big picture, which is here was that little nestle of foraging down here, and up they went to Mexico. And what we were finding with all of the tracking is that we seem to have this triangle, this big corridor, this hot spot for movement in the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. So that's some of the stuff that's come out of the tracking. And some of the other stuff that's come out of the tracking is we are linked to Cuba and down past the Cayman Islands and down over by San Andres Island off of Nicaragua and to other parts of the Gulf, etc. We even have a shark that I tagged over in Jardines de la Reina in Cuba that walked across land, got back into the water and went to the Bahamas. what happens with tags, yeah, this is where I sit down, scratch my head, and I work with a man named Matt Witt, who is a MATLAB genius. Thank goodness, because without that it would probably take me 3 years to figure this out. Anyway, we figured out that the tag the animal went deep. We're not sure if he went around this way or he went around that way, but basically it came up around the shelf here and started beetling around and foraging there before the tag came off. But what did become very, very evident with all of this tagging work was that, see, there we go, was that that is starting to appear as a huge hotspot for whale sharks in this particular region. And you might not be able to see this very well. These are boats, okay? These tiny little fadey dots are whale sharks. There's a better idea. So this is an aerial of what is now considered the largest whale shark aggregation in the world, off of Isla Mujeres in Mexico, and they're feeding on the spawn of little tunny. And so there we thought we had the only place in the world where whale sharks were feeding on spawn. Well, we've been beat. And we only had up to 25 whale sharks, and they were all around 6 meters length, and mostly juvenile males. Well, they've got it all. They've got the males, they've got the females, they've got big ones, small ones. It seems to be the big whale shark jamboree happening there from June through August, September. Direct flights into Cancun. Walmart sells whale shark tours. No, I don't propose that you go to Walmart to buy them. I propose you work locally in the local communities to go and see whale sharks. But it's absolutely spectacular. And I'm sure that if you come to Brian Scary's talk, you'll be seeing some of his fantastic photos as well. And this is I love this photo that Mauricio Handler took, because imagine that I'm sitting here trying to take my water sample, and I'm looking around and I'm trying to figure out how do I avoid 420 8-meter-long buses, because that's how many were counted in the last aerial count, 420 whale sharks in one go. And considering we don't know what the global population is, but we know that it's not a huge number worldwide, this constitutes one of the largest populations around, particularly in the region. And yes, I'm sorry, I actually put this in for the younger members of the crowd, because I don't know what it is, but everybody loves poop. And I have to say, another alert, another anecdotal alert. So there I am with all these whale sharks, and all of a sudden, I see a spawn cloud. I'm so excited. I think, fantastic. I swim through it, and then I literally butt into the butt of a whale shark, and I realize then that what I had actually been swimming through was not lovely oil-rich spawn for my hair, but lots and lots of fecal matter. And this is a word to the wise as well, I might say, that if you see a whale shark doing, I'm going to do my whale shark impression. You ready for it? Would you like to see my whale shark?
Sure.
Yes. I need encouragement sometimes. If you see a whale shark go, please move away. Because what you're seeing coming out next is this. And they really do. So there you have it. You know what to look out for, you know what to avoid, okay? And let me tell you something, I only managed to, in my life, in Gladden Spit, in all my years working with whale shark, see one whale shark poop in Gladden Spit. And, you know, I am a scientist. It's very important. I was doing stable isotope analysis to look at the nutritional content of what they were feeding on. So I was swimming behind it at 70 feet deep, and I managed to get it, and then it was streaming through my hands, and I'm trying to kind of come up to the surface and let out and let out the air so I don't go ballistic like a scud, out and come up and let out. And so I finally make it to the surface right under one of the fishing boats, and there was the venerable patriarch fisher of Gladden Spit, Mr. Jack Young. Oh, hello, Rachel. Hi, Mr. Jack. I have whale shark poop. I'm so excited. That's nice. That's nice. Could you help me put it in a container? Maybe your baler or something? Oh no. That smells really bad. And I realized I still had my mask on, and when I finally did get it into a container and I smelled it, I have to tell you, just to add to this picture, it does. It smells absolutely horrific. Right there along with vulture vomit. But that's another talk for another one. So we have a conservation conundrum, because here we have all these whale sharks that are starting to congregate to feed, and these are the tracks for all the satellite tagged sharks that have been over 20 tagged sharks. And looking at how they're utilizing the spawning aggregation area over a couple of years, particularly because I want to see whether or not the area where they're feeding on the spawn is changing, etc. And the sad aspect of this is that most of the whale sharks that had been known to aggregate and feed were feeding right here. And because they were feeding this area, they created this whale shark biosphere reserve in 2009. And then all of a sudden, they kind of discovered that there's an even bigger aggregation out here, and there is no protection for them. And for those of you who might be aware of the northern right whale issues with the shipping lanes, we have a very similar situation. These red lines here are actually all the key shipping lanes in this region. So all of a sudden, you really see we've got a major problem here. This is the world's largest aggregation, and if you don't believe me that they're in trouble, there we go. Here they are. They're all done. You can't see very well in this picture, but they're everywhere. And in fact, whale sharks are known to succumb to ship strikes quite frequently. So we have quite some work to do to take this research and data, and that's something I'm working on right now actually, and then feeding it back to the Mexican government and potentially the shipping companies, etc., to see if we can, I just heard today, slow ships down. That might be one way of doing it. Diverting traffic a little bit, particularly between July and September, and so on and so forth. And if we think that that's not the only threat that whale sharks may encounter, remember Deepwater Horizon? Well, where Deepwater Horizon is located is a key area for whale sharks. My colleague Eric Hoffmeyer is doing a lot of work up there, trying to tag. And when the spill occurred, we were very worried because we were going into main whale shark time. That's when the whale sharks move up into the northern Gulf of Mexico. And sure enough, when they did NOAA aerial overflights, we found a bunch of whale sharks in the slick. Now imagine going into a house full of smoke. You're going to suffer smoke inhalation, and many people die. Well, that's pretty much the same thing if you're going to have your gills coated with either oil or Corexit, most likely. So we have no idea how many whale sharks may have died, but we're pretty sure that we did get mortality. The problem is, unlike turtles and dolphins, they don't sink to the bottom. I mean, they don't wash up, they sink to the bottom. So I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. And this is that you can love whale sharks too much. This is in Madagascar, showing that there's absolutely no code of conduct whatsoever. So we're trying to get that together with the local tour guides. And this is in Gladden Spit in Belize, and I'm actually quite proud to have worked for many years with the tour operators there, and they really are working very hard to manage the tourism in that side, and they're doing a very good job. Because you don't want to kill the golden goose. You want those sharks to come back year after year, and you want those benefits to be distributed throughout the communities. It's very important. If you go out, you're going to swim with a whale shark, please don't do this. Or I will have to get my pole spear and chase you down. Okay? And don't do that either. Okay? Riding a whale shark, big no-no. I get very, very angry, and I can do it. not you. No, that's not true. I don't do that either. But in Ningaloo Reef, they created this, very nice guidelines, which pretty much everybody around the world has adopted. And it's very, very important to adhere to that, not only for the whale shark, but also for your own safety. And this is what happens if tourism is unregulated. You're starting to see a lot more of that in Mexico because they have pretty good practices, only 2 people in the water at a time with a whale shark and so on and so forth. But the problem is that they haven't capped the number of boats and tour operators. So it's kind of run amok, and you've got sometimes up to 50 boats at a time with the whale sharks, and it's a bit insane. And unfortunately, it's the whale sharks that tend to lose out with these deep crop chops on their body and so on. So just to let you know that we were talking about fisheries before. A lot of countries have now banned the fisheries, which is fantastic, like India, Philippines, Taiwan as of 2008, etc. And some of these studies where you're looking at the value of whale sharks, for example, Darren Davis in Australia is looking at value. I looked at that in Belize, and what I came up with for my identified population of 106 was the worth of about 34,000, almost 35,000 annually for whale shark, if we think that they're going to live about 60 years or potentially more, which is what is thought to be the longevity of a whale shark. And of course, if they're alive, you get that income over and over every year. You're seeing similar figures for also reef sharks in Maldives and Palau, etc. So this is definitely not off the mark. And your benefits are going to be very broadly distributed throughout a community and throughout many people, as opposed to just to the fisher or the fisher and his crew. I'm estimating, and this was several years ago actually, I have to say, I'd have to do the whole thing all over again, but I estimated a few years ago that global whale shark tourism, and that was before a lot of the sites had actually even developed as much as they have now, 24 to 66 million or more. And dead, in Taiwan, a dead whale shark would bring anywhere from 6,000 to 70,000, and it was huge. And they don't even get the huge ones anymore. So I'd say, this is a friend of mine who I kept saying, there's a big shark behind you. And of course, you can't speak underwater, so I keep going. And that was, that shark is actually a personal favorite. I told this story before to various folks. That's Mr. Facey in Belizean Creole. Facey is somebody with an attitude, and I'll tell the story very, very quickly. Mr. Facey decided to come and plant his snout in my abdomen at 70 feet deep. I was with my camera gear and my tagging gear and everything, and we're just sitting there. And he doesn't move, and I don't move, and he was demonstrating to me that yes, indeed, whale sharks have pretty much the smallest brain per body size ratio in the elasmobranch world. It's true, they are very much like big, floppy, dumb Labradors. And the only way I could get away from Mr. Facey was actually climbing on top of his head. So I told you, I'm allowed to do that, but in that particular situation, climbing on top of his head, hauling away from the dorsal fin and moving away. And I kid you not, that shark just kind of sat there and just went, where'd you go? Where'd you go? And so I swam away and I kind of looked at him to see what he'd do, and he went, oh, there she is, and went and did it to me again. And we did this kind of ballet routine of, okay, here we go. And so I'm kind of stomping on his head, trying to get away. We did this 3 times until I was like, ooh, ooh, better go up. So that was Mr. Facey, lovely, lovely, but stupid whale shark. This story, I'd say a very happy ending. I'd say we've debunked a lot of myths. We've solved a bunch of mysteries. We still don't know where all of the females are. We don't really know where they're giving birth exactly. Generally speaking, they seem to be reproducing wherever the feeding aggregations are, just kind of like us, really. You know, take your spouse out to the restaurant, and it works out well. And seems to do the same thing for the whale sharks. And basically, they have created very, very high profile and awareness. And that has led to protection in at least 13 countries. As I mentioned, the fisheries has ended. Conventional and international trade in endangered species is now monitoring the trade, and that's incredibly helpful to trying to stop any illegal poaching. And as I mentioned, they are global ambassadors. I really truly believe that because of whale sharks, we are seeing this huge wave of interest in protecting sharks in general. I'd say that they really open the door for having people change their attitudes towards sharks. And we really do need to step up to the plate very, very quickly, because sharks are disappearing faster than we can study them and even protect them at this stage. Unfortunately, I don't know if you know, there's been a very good study out by Eugenie Clark, this was several years ago. Tens of millions of sharks are actually fished for their fins every year, either targeted or as bycatch. And that has led to some population declines of over 90% for certain species, like the hammerheads, for example. You can barely find a hammerhead to save your life these days. And in my neck of the woods, I've got several species that are ecologically extinct. We can't find sawfish anymore, and they used to be absolutely abundant. And even hammerheads, when I'm trying to focus on, catching a hammerhead is very, very hard to put a tag on. So I guess just going back to that, all of you can act as ambassadors, and by coming to visit the aquarium, by getting more involved, by going to communities and going and doing shark swims and things like that, not just with whale sharks, go see nurse sharks. Here in Belize, we've got a lovely place with nurse sharks and stingrays. And I'll tell you about that in just 2 seconds. Very, very important to take all of these data, all of this information back and share it. Share it with the people for whom it's going to matter most. So a lot of the fishermen who could potentially depend on non-extractive resources of sharks. Also share it with the children. I'm a huge believer in getting the next generation involved. And I have to say, thanks to this fantastic illustrator, Mark Dando, if you have an opportunity to buy the Collins book, Sharks of the World, he illustrated it, and it is some of the most beautiful shark illustration you could ever hope to see. And he's been doing all kinds of illustrations for me. Things like getting stamp series, beautiful stamp series in Belize. And I'm gonna run my laser really quickly across my credit card number here so you can note it down. Okay? No going off to the Bahamas and having a good time at the Atlantis Resort with that. But yeah, managed to get a whale shark on the front of the Belize Bank credit card. And it's the most popular credit card in the country. Not mine in particular. And working with Mark Dando, we created this cast of characters who's going to bring a whole bunch of messaging to everybody, and not just the kids. Each one of these guys has their own personality and kind of represents a particular personality in Belizean culture. You got Hammer, who's kind of tough. He's not going to take any crap. I didn't even use the SEX word before. That's going to be really good. Mr. Ray, Tamba the whale shark, actually modeled after a friend of mine. I haven't told him about the brain to body. He's sweet, but. And then we've got Beto the bull shark, Rosita the reef shark, and Nellie the nurse shark. And so they're gonna be talking about sea stories to folks in Belize and all those great expressions. I have to just give you another little anecdote. I'm trying to get across to Mark, who's in Britain. I'm in Belize. I want Hammer to look this way. And this is where I have to say thank you, Steve Jobs. I'm sorry you're dead, but I love your iPod because I was able to take photos of myself kind of going. And immediately go, email. And he transformed them into those characters. So somebody has some very embarrassing photos of me somewhere. And this is what I'm incredibly proud of. Just 2 weeks ago, our first Kids Meet Sharks, a very strong fishing community, some of the fishers actually are shark fishers. They were actually responsible for practically annihilating an entire nurse shark aggregation that was used for tourism in northern Belize. Well, I thought, I'm going to show them. I'm going to take their kids. And I'm going to take them and I'm going to throw them in the water with the sharks. They signed the agreement saying, you know, you take my kid. So that was fine. No, but long story short, 20 kids, 10 adults. Many of these kids did not even know how to swim. They had never been, these are Belizean kids, they had not been to the barrier reef. They had never been in a marine protected area. They did not know how to swim. They had never snorkeled. They were really courageous. Really, really courageous. And here they all are in the water. Nurse sharks, stingrays abounding, and this was kind of the slogan at the end of the day. We no afraid for shark, which means in Creole, we are not afraid of sharks. We no afraid for shark. And in fact, it was so wonderful, they would not get out of the water at the end of the day. And what was nice was seeing all these young girls, they were all 12-year-olds, a lot of young girls who were literally empowered by this experience. And at the end of it, as I was telling Sunny earlier, they're there with their flotations having a chit-chat. He's kind of cute. He's kind of cute. There's a shark. Oh yeah, cool. Isn't he cute? I thought, you know you've got somebody comfortable, they're willing to talk about that kid next to you. They're doing really well. We couldn't get them out, and they can't wait to do it again. So this is now going to become a fixture, thanks to some money that I got from the Whitley Fund for Nature this year. I'm very excited about that. So again, you can definitely affect changes with sharks. You can come and visit the aquarium. If you're in New York, come and visit our aquarium, Wildlife Conservation Society. We're redoing our shark tank too. But you've got a phenomenal aquarium right here. So do look at all of the shark tanks that you have here. I think it's a great way to become acquainted with them. If you don't like the Discovery Channel's Shark Week, if you see something where they're sensationalizing things and they're using the wrong music, they're using the wrong words when they use bloodthirsty, man-eater, things like that, get angry, write to them. Say this is not acceptable. When people write, I have a pet peeve about this, shark-infested waters. Well, come on. Populations are so down at the moment that nothing's infested, and anyway, they're not cockroaches. So you can and do, when you think about your next vacation, think about going to Mexico, think about going to Belize or Honduras or Maldives or somewhere, and put your money into a local community and show them that you really do care about sharks. It's a really good way of demonstrating your love. And I love this. I think this is a wonderful quote. We are not afraid of predators. We're transfixed by them. Look at you all. You're here tonight for a reason. We're prone to read stories and fables and chatter endlessly about them because fascination creates preparedness, and preparedness survival. In a deeply tribal way, we love our monsters. And that's E.O. Wilson, who's the biologist emeritus at Harvard. Worked on ants, but that's okay. It works for everything. And I like to say that I love these monsters too, and I think they're fabulous, and I'm very glad that I have dedicated my life to them. And I'm very glad that you have come tonight to find out a little bit more about whale sharks. And I'd love to take any questions that you might have.